Welcome to the Home Recording Show. This is episode 310. I'm John Tidey.
I'm Ryan Canestro.
And with us today is Ben Peilow. He's an audio engineer from Kent, a fan of the show. And we're going to talk to him about live sound, Dante, and podcasting. Welcome, Ben.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Other than that you're a fan of the show and you asked to be on the show, I don't know a whole lot about you. Why don't you give us and the audience introduction to you?
So it was I'd say probably about a decade ago, if not more, that I sort of stumbled upon your podcast. A friend of mine from university, a guy called Ben McNeil, said, you've got to listen to this. So I was listening to your podcast for a really long time. It was after that point that I started getting into the world of audio. I didn't really know kind of which direction that would take, whether that was down the recording route or live sound or like festivals or theatre or what that would be, how that would entail. I sort of went with all of it and just see what would stick. And
like the rest of us, let's try all of it, see what happens.
Yeah, exactly. And essentially, I was just, all of it kind of happened at once. But I very much sort of like lent towards the live sound and I suppose, theatre as well, side of things. Yeah, so the past, sort of 10, 11 years now. Yeah, I've been doing just that.
That's nuts to think that somebody started a career in audio after we started the podcast. I don't know. That's weird.
Because that was somewhere near the beginning of our journey. And there are people younger than us. I found this out.
Yeah, they exist.
Believe it or not.
Made a few of them myself. So.
And you mostly live in the live sound world now?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, and it's so whether it's working with bands or festivals or or like I suppose theatre stuff as well. And
you're doing front of house and monitor mix.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, so doing front of house monitors, and then maybe doing some sound production stuff. So sound design within theatre, so creating sound effects for theatre, as well as doing other bits where like you might be doing sound production where you're loading a show in and loading a show out, but you're not involved in the mixing side of things. You're just rocking up to the venue, looking at it and going like, okay, we'll put those speakers there. Well, the infrastructure is going to go like this, and just make sure it all works, and then just leave someone to it. So.
Yep. And I saw your Dante certificate on your website.
It's really great that, that's even a thing that you can look after, and get a Dante certificate for free, and it's all available and you can just do it all at home, which is, really amazing.
Yeah. And I did all three. And once you get into level 3, that's ridiculous. It's crazy networking stuff. I barely made it through that one. And I do networking for fun.
Yeah, exactly that. And I've the general vibe I got was that unless you're going really, really hard into Dante networking and doing that side of things, it's very much a case of like you don't need to do level 3. But for me, it's not that way. But who knows? It might be that situation where you go, do you know what? It's time to get a real nerd on.
I went hard on it because I just said hard on. But I went deep into that because I did start building a system that required some of the advanced networking, and stuff started breaking without it. Once we had 15, 20 devices mixed with gigabit and 10100 stuff, it started getting ugly.
Yeah, sure. And was that like a live sound thing that you were doing, or was that like
That was a sitcom that was not exactly a sitcom. There was a ton of wireless, and it was a huge production with hidden camera or like improv elements and a full stage setup, which lived on stage the whole time. So I could build a monster and let it be there.
Yeah. Wow. That sounds cool.
Crazy stuff. Ben, you are, you've worked in live sound and all aspects of audio, it seems like. And when you were first getting started, was there any particular struggles that you remember, things that were really hard to overcome with learning it, or any mistakes you made that you can remember?
Never made any mistakes in the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely not. It was absolutely flawless. No, it was the thing that I really struggled with is like just ringing out a system, and that just comes down to experience of knowing that if there's a bit of feedback, knowing where that feedback is and how to get rid of it as quickly as possible.
Yeah, troubleshooting fast and figuring out which sound, which buzz, which click, which hum meant which thing, what to look at first. How to go down that chain without trying to jump into something too advanced first. When is it plugged in? Is it turned on? Those are some of the hardest lessons to learn, and you'll spend a lot of time doing the wrong thing before you have done it several times go, oh, it's just this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And also the general kind of lesson that I ended up teaching myself was that if you're hearing hooves, it's probably not zebras, it's going to be horses. You know, don't go with the outlandish thing that it could be. It's probably something really simple. Like, oh, we've completely lost a vocal, for example. It's probably just because it's not being plugged in or something that obvious rather than, oh, the microphone's broken. You know, if it's
a bit of an air
SM58,
gap first.
Yeah. So things like that. But yeah, I remember sort of really specifically when I was doing some stuff with my dad, and he's still runs a gospel choir over at the local university. So he's been the head of that for a long time now, and that was kind of one of my first ever jobs. So you're looking at condenser mics of people of varying volumes. They're not professional singers; they were all just university students in the same place as a band, and making sure that the balance is you can hear what they're singing over the top of this quite like loud and getting really into it gospel band. And knowing to go right, I need to bring those microphones up, and knowing kind of where that's going to be feeding back. And like I say, it was just more of a knowledge thing to like hear a frequency and go, that's about 500 hertz or whatever it may be. That was definitely a struggle toward the beginning. And then, as I'm sure we've all done in the past, we get to situations where, you get to a gig and something sounds really amazing. You're like, those drums sounded incredible. What magic were you doing on that desk? EQ or compression, effects, the combination of all three. And yeah, so it was just always just like hopping over people's shoulders and being like, oh, what did you do to those tom mics? And yeah, so that was always just a bit of a thing. I'd always have a chat with people.
Yeah, it turns out no matter what magic you could do on the board, the good player sounds good on a set no matter what you do. You just bring up the faders. So I learned that. Like I kept trying to get drum sounds on these drummers over and over and over again. Could not get it. Then this amazing drummer came in and my sound was amazing. I was like, oh,
yeah,
maybe there's something to this excellent player playing a well-tuned instrument.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. And, and exactly that same vibe of, you're, like you say, you're just essentially making something that sounds really good louder, and that's it. So all the work is done for you. Like you say, if it's a well-tuned kit, if it's a really great sounding guitar and a really great sounding amp, you're halfway there, really.
Polishing the turds is much harder to do.
Oh my God, yeah.
And then also in live sound, you have to be able to react very quickly. When there's a problem, it has to get fixed now. There's a room with an audience in it, and things are happening right now in real time.
Yeah,
and
totally.
it could get a little stressy at times, especially in the beginning when you don't know how to fix some of those issues off the top of your head immediately.
Yeah. I mean, that was probably one of my favorite things I ever did. Was a really simple live sound sort of based gig. It was an awards ceremony for like a local like football club, sort of for the under 18s and below. And so it was very much sold to me as like this one guy with a microphone, some backing tracks as people are coming onto stage, and that's it. I was like, yep, sounds easy. What a lovely thing to sort of start off in this brand new venue into. And so we got there and everyone turned up with like a whole bunch of CDs. Some of them were scratched. I'm like, right, this is a good start. One person turned up with a really old MP3 player. And it was one of those ones where it was just labeled as track 12, track 7, track 2. And it was shuffling constantly. And it was like, oh, it's track 5. I'm like, there's 1,000 track 5s. Where do I even begin? So there was that going on. Someone turned up with a DVD rather than a CD. And expected me to play that. So that was all going on. And then there was like a dance troupe promoting a show. So they were doing a little bit. And then when they kind of ended, like all the lights went off. I was like, that was really cool. But that wasn't me. And it turned out that there was a massive power cut in the town that we were in. And so like this big old hall with, a good 400 people in it, like kids of varying age, in a completely dark space without any microphones, without any amps. Without anything going on there, and I just had to kind of just shout in the room to kind of let everybody know the power's gone out. So that was a real sort of trial by fire. It was just a series of really unfortunate things happening all at once. But that was, one of those gigs where you just want to swallow up and die and be like, oh, let today be over.
Getting to the other side of it, you made it through.
Totally.
Nobody died.
Yeah.
Most people had a good time.
Yeah.
You can do it.
Yeah, exactly. And we had to sit in the dark for 20 minutes and wait for the power to come on. It was great.
And I've been in the middle of that show. One of the biggest shows I mixed at this one venue. The power went out. I don't know if they were running too much stuff or what it was. And full nightclub, bar, everything out, dark.
Man.
No music.
Oh, man.
It's a weird, eerie feeling when that place gets quiet.
Yeah, sure. No doubt.
I was wondering if you were a freelance engineer in the sense that you get the call and you go and they've got the gear, or if you have your own whole kit of gear, whole PA and everything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, funny enough, as you can probably see behind me, there's a whole just a bunch of stuff around me, but I
There's a
share
bunch
like
of
a warehouse. A whole bunch of just nonsense, yeah. But it's a shared warehouse space with me and a couple of other engineers. But yeah, I used to I was amassing like mixing desks and microphones and all sorts of things. And actually, like most of the time, I was just rocking up as a white glove engineer anyway. So all the kit was already there, or be touring with a big old rig on a theatre show, for example, and everything's already there for you. So I've just got like a few little bits these days. I've just got like a Peilow case that I'll take on tour, which has got like maybe a 58, which is basically for my talkback. I'm working on monitors and stuff. It's got my in-ears. It's got just a few like those random cables that like go, oh, have you got? Yep, we've got one of those. Cable testers and all that sort of thing. So that's kind of more what I've got now. But I've got like a bit of a mic locker of stuff so that I could rock up with a band and go, cool, here's all of our microphones. We're good to go. We're ready to go.
Cool. So a bit of both. Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I go back and forth between having a massive truck full of stuff that I bring myself and just showing up and working with what they've got. So yeah, mix and match, do all the things.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever the job entails and stuff, and it could well be that I just rock up with a drum set, mic set, like we've got a Audix thing going on, so like the D6, the D2s, the D4s. So just rock up with that and nothing else, or a full mic package or something, and DI boxes. So it's all very much dependent on job to job, really, for me.
Ben, before you were live engineer, you were also in a band, right? Where you were recording. You had some interesting techniques to talk about.
So wait a minute, there are sound people that also play in bands?
Yeah, believe it or not.
First time hearing of this.
Yeah, and in a classic sort of like adding to that trope, I was the bass player. So it's a really
unheard of.
Yeah, unheard of indeed.
It's weird that the bass player is the technical guy. Weird.
Yeah.
Bass player turned audio engineer. That sounds like me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I play bass more now than I play any other instrument.
There we go. Yeah. And so I was in a band a few years ago now called Smoking Grace. And one thing I always wanted to do was really kind of like push for I'll do the recording, but I don't necessarily have the gear or the time or the means to be able to kind of properly mix it. So we always send it off to get it mixed and edited and stuff. But I always wanted to make sure with the recording that we were doing something like really interesting and really different. For the first EP, we decided we weren't going to be in the studio. We decided that we were going to just do stuff in situ. So we were kind of really committing to sound. So for the drums, we utilised, again, where my dad's gospel choir, we went to the chapel at this university, and it had this like great big steeple. It's like this huge thing.
We start with a good room.
Yeah, it was a really great sounding room. And where the guys were sort of singing was actually quite dead when you were kind of on that space. It was kind of this weird like acoustic anomaly. So the drums were on that, and then with the room mics we were using were the reverb. So when we said to the mix engineer, a guy called Oz Craggs, and we said to him like, if you want to add reverb to the drums, use the room mics, don't use a plugin, And yeah, he still says like, this is still all these years later, best room sounds that I've ever sort of had the pleasure of sort of playing around with. I was like, oh, that's wicked. That's really cool. We were doing things where we had like BVs and we were at the top of a stairwell, and then we'd have a microphone down on each level, and then we'd automate it so that, that each microphone came in bit by bit. So it was becoming more and more reverberant and stuff like that.
We had added in the song where it calls for a bigger space, and you can just add in those mics. That's clever.
Yeah, which is really cool. And then we wanted like a song to fade out, so we actually did a proper actual fade out. So when the guy was singing, our singer Mark, he'd sort of slowly step away from the microphone, and then he was playing guitar at the same time. And then we'd move the guitar on a dolly, or the amp, on a dolly, so that the amp would slowly move away from the microphone and stuff like that.
Wow.
From just a 57, and just playing around with really cool creative ideas like that. We had an old like telephone something from my nan's house that I'd sort of rewired, and we used that for our lo-fi sound rather than sort of going for a lo-fi preset on an EQ or something like that. So, and yeah, we're just doing all sorts of things like that. It was just really kind of like a really creative, creative vibe and creative sessions and stuff.
I love real world effects. That's kind of where my head always wants to go. I'd rather try to achieve it in a space than try to use a plugin or modify electronics in some weird and unusual way.
Yeah, and definitely calling back to the old episodes of yours as well, sort of utilizing the Sony F98 where we could, you know what I mean? So
Yeah. Love that horrible mic.
Yeah. So that definitely got used a couple of times.
That's funny.
Yeah, it was great. And then we did one song that didn't quite make it, and it was sort of like we wanted it to sound like a bit ambient and stuff. And we found this like really, it sounds really weird, but like a really great sounding bridge nearby, and we just literally just like waited for it to be really quiet. It was quite late at night, sort of sat there with the recording, I think it was just like a Zoom handheld recording thing, and just fired it at him, the singer Mark playing acoustic guitar, and it sounded really cool. But it was a song that never made it. But yeah, that's in an old session file somewhere on a hard drive. But yeah, so that was really cool. No, it was nice to be able to kind of utilize those kind of really weird techniques and stuff. And it's something that I've always done, even within the live sound side of things as well, trying to be sort of a bit creative. We do this festival in Deal called Smugglers Festival. And we do this thing where you have the stage sort of like in the center and the PA either side as you would normally. And then we had another sort of exactly the same PA even further out and sort of like almost like creating a semicircle. The idea being that we wanted to kind of create as much clarity width-wise as possible because it's quite a wide field. And the guy that I do that festival with, we're like, well, can we try something a bit different? And what we did is we sent anything that would be panned hard left would go into the center PA, if you want to call it that. Anything panned hard right will go to the outer PA. We're like, well, how can we creatively go a bit kind of bonkers with that, essentially? So when I was mixing it, I was doing things like for drums, I was sending all the shells to the inside PA, and then the reverb and the metalwork and stuff and the overheads into the outside. So when you were in this kind of quite small field, but it's just still quite wide, but we it sounded like you were kind of in the drum kit and stuff. We were doing situations where panning reverbs or effects left to right was kind of going in and out, so it created like a whole different vibe, and it was almost like a 3D mix, and it was so that was always been really good, and we've sort of done that every year since then. That was a couple of years ago before the pandemic, and people when they're walking away from a band, they're patting you on the shoulder being like, that sounded great. I was like, okay, that's cool. If they're coming up to you as the engineer on a festival and you're just as much as like, that was really cool, as you're saying it to the band, you're saying it to me as well. It's like, okay, got something quite cool here.
That's amazing.
It's a really good fun. And one thing that we did, which is really brilliant, we had something so simple. It was like a Bulgarian choir. It's like a world music festival. And we had this situation where it was, the whole choir in a semicircle on stage. We had 4 mics, and they were kind of arranged kind of like the PA. So I'm like, okay, the 2 on the mics on the inside, let's pan those hard left to go into the center. Let's pan the other outside ones hard right, so they're on the outside. Which kind of helped from a feedback point of view as well, because some of them were like really far away from the speakers. And that was it. That was just them. And there was no instrumentation, and people walked away going like, that was the highlight of the weekend. And because it felt like I was included in this whole thing with them on stage, and it was, so the audio had really kind of like helped along with the experience of that. And it was, that was a really good vibe, and it was just really, really cool to do that.
Very cool.
Yeah, you really don't hear it about things like that in live sound. It's often like fully mono or it's stereo, and then people miss out on part of the experience if they're on one side or the other.
Exactly that, yeah.
Yeah, and so that like middle and outer panning option is really cool.
Yeah, you have to be sort of like a little bit, you do have to do a bit of timing onto the delays of the speakers just to kind of make sure it's all kind of hitting in the same way.
Yeah, because you do have to compensate for all of that space too.
Yeah. And it's, but apart from that, it's kind of really minimal processing. We tried to sort of like do it sort of on a budget really, and it worked really well. And then of course you had some guest engineers coming along, and they were going, "What are you doing?" Like you had to really explain it. They're like, they were fully, like you say, fully expecting a mono mix straight down the middle. I was like, look, if you don't want to go too mental with it, put everything in the middle, you're good to go. Like, and then just mix it as normal. But if you want to go a bit crazy, here's what we're doing. Here's here's what's going on if you pan things left or right. And cool. And sort of people walk away from it going like, that's cool. They're a bit like, what is this festival? And but then by the end of the festival, and they've done the mix, and they've like experienced what we've been experiencing for the whole weekend, they're like, okay, yeah, I'm sold. I'm in. This is cool.
Very cool. During the pandemic, you started a podcast. I don't know much about it, but I think it's about finding good news.
Yeah, that was kind of the general gist of it. It was, We decided, me and a friend of mine, a guy called Kes Parvin, we've always said that we wanted to do a podcast together. And I said, I was about to go on a tour mid-March of 2020, and that was going to go on for like 6-7 months. So I said, all right, when we're back from that tour, let's do it. Let's go for it. And we were sort of in the pub deciding what we were going to even talk about. We didn't even have that in the bag. And around that time, what was in the news around that time, like the Australian bushfires. I think Kobe Bryant had just recently passed away. There was stuff going on like politically that was all just this hard negative thing. And we always said that, isn't it amazing that in the news is this stream of negativity? Oh, and this is nice at the end. And wouldn't it be amazing if that was just the whole premise of the whole thing, trying to find the good news and stuff and find like a load of positivity. And it wasn't too niche of a podcast as well. The last thing.
What was the name of it?
It's called Two Peas in a Pod. And that was purely because my name being Peilow and his being Parvin. So it's like, oh yeah, perfect. It kind of worked out quite well. And so yeah, with Two Peas in a Pod, it was all about like positivity, finding good news. And then when the pandemic hit, I was like, cool, I've got loads of time. And now more than ever, we're going to need some positivity whilst everyone's like locked in their house and, going absolutely like stir crazy. So yeah, so we decided to do that, and we were sort of going, it started off as that, and then we ended up getting some guests in. We had some sort of celebrities and stuff, like and comedians and musicians and like local businesses and stuff. And we also were trying to do this whole thing of going like finding for segments like, oh, here's a way of how exercise can look after your mental health, and then going, okay, no, let's actually practice what we preach. So we decided to do like a few physical sort of challenges and things and then raising money along the way. We did some things like, oh, here's how journaling can help. So like, we journaled for a week and things like that. We did some bits of like stuff like the Wim Hof method with cold exposure and getting in the ice baths and stuff and breath work and all that sort of crazy stuff. And I'm still doing that now because I absolutely loved it. And so it was just a really like lovely way to spend the lockdown and things, and also just to keep that like audio muscle flexed a little bit.
Sure.
Well, I'm going to have to take a listen to that because I've definitely cut out all news, social media, all of it during this time, just realizing how toxic that is day in, day out, to just be absorbing all that.
Yeah, totally. And, we took a little bit of a break while I was on the show and stuff. So we're kind of getting back to it for season 2 actually quite soon. And I think, again, now more than ever, there's so much so much negativity and stuff that's actually quite anxiety inducing and sort of really bad for everybody's mental health. And so, now, as I say, more than ever, we should get back to it. And it was just a really lovely thing to do. And, from the back of that, there was there's a guy called Dr. Rand, who was one of our guests, who's like a TV doctor. So he's on talk shows on the BBC and ITV and stuff. And he was one of our guests, which was really good fun. And he was doing a podcast with other TV doctors. And from that, he sort of said, it'd be really great if you could audio edit and produce our podcast as well. So he was sending us stems and stuff. So it was great just to kind of go like, cool, there's a little bit of way of making a little bit of money whilst, as I'm sure it was for you guys as well, we, as the audio industry here, certainly, especially the live industry, was like, we were the first into lockdown and the last out, and we're not really out of it.
Yeah. And the movie industry, we were done. Like it all happened really fast. And we had 1 week off that turned into half the year.
Sure. Yeah. Because for me, it was very much a case of, I was meant to be going on this tour, and they said like, all right, we'll give it 2 weeks, see where we're at. Because 2 weeks happened, and there's like, maybe like the summer, and then the summer rolled, and maybe
next summer.
Yeah. And here we are, sort of, luckily I was really lucky to that tour was like a kids show for a theatre thing as well for the BBC. And it was very much a case of that we were still able to do that thing, and kids were able to do it because kids were able to attend and stay. And theatre was really great, whereas opposed to gigs, everyone's mingling. And it was really hard to do. Whereas theatre, you can go like, okay, we're social distancing, so you can sit over there, you can sit over there. So it actually was sort of like the best way of kind of getting back into the industry in that way. So it's but that was a really lovely tour to kind of get back onto as well. So it was really cool. For you guys then, is it sort of very much the case of that you're slowly but surely back to normal in post-pandemic world? Or
slowly coming back for me. I'm on a TV show now. I have been since January.
Nice.
shows just kind of all went away. The show I was on just like canceled. Like we finished out the last 6 episodes. We stopped in March, came back in like October, November to finish it out those last 6 on the contract. And then no renewal of season 3, just done. And then it's just been kind of bit work this whole time. We get tested constantly, every couple days, every new job tested. It's starting to relax a little bit. I mean, minor concessions, but it's still, 6 feet apart, eating lunch. We're all distanced out, masks all day, every day.
Yeah.
We did talk about that on an episode pretty recently. So
yeah.
Won't get into that too much again. For me, it's been definitely the first part of it was more busy than ever. Tons of people buying my courses. A lot of people wanted to make videos using Reaper.
Great.
People had time.
Yeah, and a lot of people they were recording videos of themselves playing their instrument and editing that into a video with the rest of their band. So a lot of people were doing that. I think that's died off. I never liked the look of those videos. It's just because it's vertical cell phone videos, and I hate that. But
sure,
I'm with you.
But yeah, just tons of people wanted lessons. I picked up a couple podcasts to edit during that time, where I was doing like full sound design in those podcasts and tons of dialogue editing for a voice acted podcast. And the entire time I'm thinking, I should start up the podcast. I should talk to Ryan. I was thinking like right in March, I was like, I should talk to him. And like 2 years go by before we finally get started again. I was thinking in March 2020, I should do a podcast. And I'm like, there's always something else to do.
Yeah, sure.
I was like, Ryan might not want to do it anyway. So,
and I did the whole time. It's just, crazy life, all of that fun stuff. So starting to settle back down a little bit into a groove, I guess.
It's fun to restart the show and have a bit of an audience already and to approach it in a new way with the video and just like, the way we produce it is different as well. Like I was telling you earlier, we record 2 episodes at a time every 2 weeks, and that gives us so many episodes in advance that, I can edit them at my leisure and publish them at a certain time. And yeah, that's been
and some flexibility
really interesting
in the schedule because my life's insane. So trying to pin me down, I feel bad. Sorry, John, in advance.
It used to be tough to get an episode recorded because we were either one of us would be busy at a normal time, and then I would rush to get it out the next day, even though there's no one really waiting at a specific time. But now we have a specific time. Everyone knows where it goes. It's on my YouTube. It's on the website. It's up on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and everywhere. And the whole publishing thing takes forever. I think I spend more time on publishing it than on actually editing it now. Well, I think we rip through the content pretty quickly now compared to before. Maybe we don't go in as deep doing pre-recorded segments and all these audio tests and stuff like that. But I think we have a more lively and interesting conversation about it. And that's what I miss through the pandemic, because we used to go to sound designer meetups and things.
You used to go places.
Vancouver.
And do things
I haven't been
people.
to a restaurant this entire time. So I've barely seen anyone that I know this entire time since March 2020. So if I want that human interaction, it's either starting a podcast or it's going live every day and creating a parasocial relationship where I'm sharing too much about my personal life with the audience that thinks they're my friend. And it's bad. So I don't do that.
Sure.
So podcast it is.
Nice.
And then did we want to get too deep in the weeds on Dante? Probably not, right? I don't want to make John sad.
Well, I mean, it's kind of interesting. I've forgotten everything you told me about it the first time. Been you own Dante gear or use it regularly?
Yeah, so there's a couple of productions which I'm involved in which use a bit of Dante stuff, and there's one which is purely Dante. everything's kind of running from everywhere. So we've got QLab, which is like a theatre kind of playback system, and that's using sort of video and audio and all that sort of thing. And this one particular show is running timecode. The whole show's run off timecode. So the timecode's running through that system, and that's running to the video, and it's running to the lighting as well.
So it's doing the cues.
Yeah. So it's doing everything there. So when we don't need a video person.
So the time code's going to trigger video clips. The time code's going to trigger sound effect playback, and the time code's also going to cue lighting effects.
Exactly that, yeah. So it's all just, the desk is just receiving just, that information, and it would just be like, oh, I should be in lighting queue 35 or whatever it may be.
If someone's going to look up that software, that's QLAB or QUELAB?
QLAB. And it's it's a Mac-based bit of software, but you can do all sorts of stuff with it. I use it for theatre stuff, so I look after the sound design and the sound effects for the pantomime, the theatre thing that happens every Christmas. And it's a really involved sound-based show for us. When I started doing it, there was like 44 effects over the whole show, and the year that we had about 190 or something mental. Different effects.
Yeah, and that's too much to cue for a human.
Yeah,
to get them deadly accurate.
Yeah. So but with pantomime, because it's such an off the cuff thing, I end up doing it on the fly. I'm the one hitting go on those every single time, which is, you have to be absolutely poised and ready to go. And if in a situation where there's COVID and I had to take time off because I had to isolate, I had to sort of just make as many notes as possible. So if someone took over, they could be like, right, on that word there, you have to hit go on this particular sound effect. So QLab's really good for that. So you can sort of build things, though. You might have like, what's a good example? Like a door opens. So you might have like a sound effect of like the door creaks and the door kind of like locks and, whatever it may be.
Doorbell,
sort of
knock.
Yeah. So you can kind of create that kind of folder of stuff. It also deals with video and video playback. It does, you can do like the fades and stuff. You can integrate, if you've got like the audio license, you can integrate your own plugins and stuff. So you can add in Waves plugins and all that sort of amazing stuff. You can keep it all in house.
It sounds a bit like a sampler, but it does.
It kind of
does video and lights and sounds.
Yeah.
And as separate events that you trigger remotely.
Yeah.
Through like a Stream Deck, or it has a dedicated console or something.
So it's all sort of built into the built into your like laptop or your Mac or something, or your Mac Mini and things like that, and then that just goes. What we did, which was quite interesting, is we had all the playback for the band on a separate QLab file on a separate machine for this particular show, and we had it so that like the stereo stems, we had like a multi-output interface that was using, so one might be percussion, one might be strings, one might be brass, because we didn't have a full orchestra. So we were able to use this QLab to go, cool, I can see the interface. These are kind of the outputs that I'm sending things out on. And that was great. And that worked out really well.
Like to the drummer.
Yeah, exactly that. And we were able to, and even sort of moments where I had to kind of like do an emergency recording of someone because they started losing their voice. You can, you can kind of, do like a backup if we never used it, but it was there if we needed it. And so, someone could be singing like in the ensemble in the background, and it's not like, oh, I'm clearly there singing. So, it's really easy to integrate that. But with the show that I was using timecode on, it was, it had the one long audio file, which is like the 50 odd minute show that it was. And timecode's running across the whole thing. We had a situation where the Dante was sending audio to in-ear monitors, because these people were in like a giant sort of like skin costume. But we were not only using it for in-ear monitors, but it was attached to the animatronics, so that the peaks and troughs of the audio would move the mouth open and closed, so that there wasn't anybody operating, which is really cool. And so it meant that it was just absolutely accurate, and it was all as well. So that was really good. And but that was kind of weird when you get to some venues, they rock up and they go, oh, cool, maybe you wanted to kind of integrate outputs, for example. You want to change that to that. I was like, do you know what? There's so much going on Dante-wise that I'm not the one that set this up. I'm just, you know what? It's so convoluted. Let's just leave it as is. We'll work around it. But, from running the cables out, we've got, back in the day, you would have had like giant reams of massive thick cables that you'd have to run out like 70 odd meters. And yeah, it's just, it was painful, and quite literally. And Whereas now you just got like a couple of bits of Cat5 and a couple of bits of fiber that was running other little bits, and that's it. And that was great, and a bit of power. So in the grand scheme of things, it was like really, really easy to tour. So if nothing else, to be able to use Dante and you've got like just a couple of bits of Cat5 cable and you're good to go.
And if you have to change patching, it's simple as opening up a program and clicking on it, and you just reroute audio instead of having to chase down which cable in this snake is the one I'm looking for, which input is it in, pull it out of that, put it into another. Oh, this 100%. Connector is a different kind of connector. Now I need an adapter. None of that. Just click, click.
Yeah, definitely.
And for, big venues, if you have your front of house, your stage box on stage, monitor mixes, to connect all that together with Dante's, as simple as it gets. It's just fiber for the long run, Cat6 in between the shorter runs. Everything talks to each other.
Yeah. This all as well. And then what I've done before when I've been touring with bands and we've integrated using Dante as an interface. You can use the Dante virtual sound card. And so it will see like, oh great, you can assign what inputs go to what and into your interface. And then I had a multi-channel recording of the band. And then in equal measure, when we had a situation where like it was snowing really heavily and stuff and the band couldn't quite make it, we had a situation where I was like, okay, cool, let's do the reverse of that and then send that back into the desk from the multi, and we got a virtual sound check, and that's just really, like I say, it's just all done within a program. It's in like a grid-based system of like, here's my ins, here's my outs, all as well. And, it's just so easy to integrate. It's so easy to work with. And to do that kind of manually, like you say, if it was like, oh, I'm now having to physically do those connections, it would just take forever. Whereas I can just quickly like bosh something together. It's great.
I'm doing on my sound cart. My laptop just sits on top of the cart. It's one Cat6 cable out into my laptop using Dante Virtual Sound Card, and I'm backing up 18 channels of audio from my cart with one cable. It's that simple, and click, 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 send.
Yeah.
And that just runs all day. So if I miss a take, if something happens, if I don't engage one of the tracks, my backup recorder is recording all 18 channels all day long, every day.
Yeah. And you think about like even sort of 10 years ago, like how many cables that would have to be to kind of get that into your laptop or your Mac,
and then some kind of interface, and then preamp gain and all of these things. It's just one cable in to my computer's network port and hit record.
Is this a technology that we should be paying attention to in the small home studio scale? I know that a few people use them. What's the minimum entry point for Dante? What's the main reason someone would use that over like a USB 3 audio interface?
I think from a recording standpoint, I suppose it could be quite useful if like you're quite blessed to have like a sort of like a multi-room setup, and you can kind of use Dante to kind of network between room to room. So you might have something where like you got like a stage box style thing in one room, and maybe another room or something like that. But in a really small scale setup, if you've got the capabilities of doing it, the one thing that, if nothing else, is it's just really solid, and it's really easy to work with.
It's more about audio transport, getting it from place to place.
Right. So instead of a snake cable with 12 lines in and out, or like, let's say it's eight in and 2 out or something like that.
Yeah.
It's a pretty thick cable that is losing some signal through that path. As you got to drill a hole through the wall or something like that. Maybe your house already has the jacks for Cat5, Cat6, or in any event, it's a smaller hole you drill through.
Yeah. Really easy to pull one Cat6 line through a house.
And so you could have it for a vocal booth. Snake. You could have it for a drum room.
Yeah.
And it's pretty simple and in a way it's non-permanent, because you can, it's just a jack on the wall if you need it, or it's a simple cable that's carrying up to 64 tracks or something like that.
512 in each direction.
That's nuts.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Uncompressed audio waves.
And so you need something. So let's say on the control room side, or wherever the computer is, what sort of connection do you need to get that from digital Dante into something your computer can use?
It's just Cat6. So the same Cat6 cable that'll plug into your computer, that same network jack, that's all it is. So you can connect to a regular network switch into as many Dante devices as you want, they'll all talk to each other, and you could send any audio from anything connected to that, being if it's a laptop, if it's an audio interface, if it's a full mixing board, a stage box, DI, all the different devices, they'll all just talk to each other. And you can send multiple copies to multiple different places. You can have one audio input, send it to 6 locations if you want. And it's basically a digital splitter as well.
Yeah.
Okay. So
it doesn't have to be point to point.
So it would be mic into a preamp that has a Dante out?
Yep.
Or into maybe a standalone preamp that it goes into a Dante adapter sort of thing?
Yeah, and some kind of, some A to D, and then Dante conversion.
Okay, and then on the control room side, Dante comes into the computer, and then how do you monitor it?
So Dante Virtual Sound Card is on your computer. It's a $30 piece of software, plugs into a regular network port, and then you can just route any of the audio right in your computer directly into your DAW.
Now, I wonder if I should be using that for my video recording setup, because right now I'm using 2 computers for most of my recordings.
Yeah.
And I send audio from Reaper on my Mac over HDMI into a capture card to my PC, which works pretty well. But maybe Dante works better. I've tried NDI, and that seems to drift between the video and the audio.
Well, and Dante is also now going to transport video. So you can do full video feeds. So you can do, I believe, 4K video feeds alongside 16 channels of audio.
I should try that, and that's going to cost me $30.
Well, the Dante Virtual Sound Cards, if you have just 2 of those on a network, then I believe there's a clocking issue without having another Dante device with a proper clock.
Okay, and so there's a Focusrite makes kind of a small interface, right? One of the RedNet things. It's like a little desktop thing.
Yep.
I think that's
those
the
are great.
smallest one that I've seen made for home studios.
Yeah, the playback guy on my show has one of those on his cart, and his whole cart's Dante. So when he does playback on the show, we just connect one cable, and then I can also send him any dialogue tracks. He can send me he sends timecode stripe and audio playback. So he's got one of those little red nets. The director wanted an additional mic for talkback. We plugged it in right to his little redneck guy on his cart. Then he sent that over to one of the speakers, and then I could send a copy of any of the other microphones back to him. Then he could send them out to the speakers for playback. It's fully like it would just click one microphone in, and we could route it anywhere on our massive network that we already had set up.
Does the network have to be like really substantial, or can it be a kind of typical home setup?
It could be simpler than a home setup. It's just a regular old gigabit switch. I've got 2 little Netgear 8 ports that I got for, I don't know, $40 new each that I use when I have to extend my network out.
Right on. So if I've got a network hub Wi-Fi router that's got 4 ports on the back, and I've got 4 computers, that's probably all I need to do this.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And exactly what Ryan's saying there, you've got, from a live sound point of view, we might have something where we have just the one stage box. And from a Dante point of view, we can send that out to the monitor engineer. We can send another sort of cable out to the front of house engineer, and then another cable that we can go from there to the broadcast truck. One thing is going to 3 different places in an old analog way. That would have just been loads of cable.
And then you can also do one more cable out of that right into a laptop, set up a recording software, and record a full multi-track. So now 4 sources are getting it, no problem.
Yeah,
and I suppose you could probably tap into any of those boxes and just repeat the signal out to the next.
Well, everything repeats, comes into a switch. So it's a star topology. So everything connects to a network switch. So you can connect more things to that switch. And then the Dante runs on 2 networks. So you only need the A network to be connected, but you can also set up a whole B network, separate network switch, separate network IP addresses. But then if for some reason one of the A network goes down on that device, it just automatically defaults to the B network, and you have redundancy in that way.
Yeah. Sounds like totally overkill, but sometimes the perfect solution.
Well, if you're in the middle of a live show and someone goes across the lawn with a big heavy piece of gear and it crushes your A cable, completely gone, the show would go down in that moment. But Dante just automatically switches to the B network, so you wouldn't lose front of house.
Wicked.
Yeah. And the only thing to worth noting as well is that it's just around 100 meters that it runs out to. So when if you're designing it from a live sound point of view, you might have like, say, I don't know, as far as like 70 or 80 meters away to your front of house position. But then you've got that kind of extra 20 meters or so to think about, okay, well, that's going to go to the monitor engineer, that's going to go here, it's going to go there. So as long as you've got asymmeters and stuff. So if you're going into a venue, you might sort of plug it into a Cat 5, Cat 6 port within a venue, but they might go like just miles around the building. So that if it's not working, that's something to kind of consider and things. So if you're doing it within your house, it's kind of making sure that is the rough distance. Like in a house, it should be fine. If you're in a big,
that's about 300 feet.
Venue.
And I usually don't go more than 250 feet. So a little less than the theoretical limit. But then over fiber, you can go miles if you want. And I have done it over fiber for going a long distance I was in an office that was down a hallway, around a corner, and then we ran fiber all the way up and over into the stage underneath the audience. And then everything else from there was copper once it got to the switch.
I knew you guys would geek out about Dante. So.
It's pretty amazing for if you have multiple devices and you want to send any audio to any part of that. And like we had a guy coming do audience warm up from an iPad. I just put Dante into I have a radial stage box that's Dante, plug into that, and he can just do 1/8" jack right out of his iPad into that, just a DI that I set up. And then I could route that multiple places. I also have radial boxes for DJ, left and right. Plug into that, one Cat 6 from the switch, and then now I have that DJ input anywhere I need it.
Yeah, I'd like to wrap up now.
But I've got 3 more hours of Dante.
Ben, so good to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh man, it's been such a pleasure. It's been 10 years ago me is going like, oh my god, this is great. So no, this has been an absolute pleasure, guys, and it's just been a real honor, and thanks for everything you guys do.
I'm gonna go check out your podcast now and fanboy on that.
Thanks, man. Nice.
All right, everyone, thank you so much for watching and listening. If you want to support the show, go to buymeacoffee.com/HRS podcast. You can support the show with a $5 virtual coffee. Really helps support my efforts in producing this show. And if you do that, you get your name at the end of the show. You can find Ben online. We're going to have links to his website, Twitter, Instagram, and podcast. And thanks again. See you guys.
Bye, everybody.
See ya.